My name is Odessa Harlow. I'm 36 years old. And last week, a lawyer called me saying I inherited a beach house from my dead mother-in-law. I didn't even know she was alive. You heard that right. My mother-in-law, who I watched my husband grieve for 5 long years, who we supposedly scattered her ashes for, who I bought memorial flowers for every Mother's Day, she wasn't dead. She was very much alive, living in a $3.2 million beach house on Martha's Vineyard, watching her son destroy 2 families while she said nothing. My hands are still shaking as I tell you this. My voice probably sounds like I've been crying, because I have. 4 days. But not the kind of crying you think. Not the sad, broken-hearted crying. No, this is the kind of crying that comes from pure, volcanic rage mixed with the most devastating betrayal you could ever imagine. When I went to that lawyer's office, cold, sterile, smelling like old leather and broken dreams, he said something that made my blood run cold. Your mother-in-law left the house to you, not your husband. The way he said it, with this careful, measured tone, like he was delivering news about the weather instead of a nuclear bomb that would obliterate everything I thought I knew about my life. I didn't understand why. Why me? Why not Bowen, her precious son? Why the woman she'd never even met, according to him? The woman who supposedly didn't exist in her final years because she was too sick, too fragile, too close to death to meet new people? Until I went there. Until I saw the photos. On the wall, in beautiful silver frames arranged like a shrine to happiness, were pictures of my husband smiling with another woman and 2 kids I'd never seen before. Not distant relatives. Not family friends. His other wife. His other children. His other life. The neighbor, this sweet elderly woman with kind eyes and a Boston accent, she came over with fresh cookies and said something that will haunt me forever. They'd been spending every holiday there for the past 5 years. Such a lovely family. Bowen, Talia, and those beautiful twins. 5 years. My entire marriage was a lie. Every business trip. Every client emergency that kept him away for weeks. Every time he came home exhausted and distant, claiming the stress of work was killing him. Every anniversary dinner where he seemed distracted, checking his phone, saying he had to handle urgent business calls. Every Christmas morning when he'd disappear for hours, claiming he was visiting his mother's grave. He was with them. Building a life with them. Playing father to children who called him daddy while I sat at home, childless and patient, supporting his career, managing our household, being the perfect wife to a man who saw me as nothing more than a convenient placeholder. Before I tell you how I exposed everything, how I burnt his entire world to the ground and walked away with everything he thought he'd hidden from me, I need you to understand something. This isn't just a story about cheating. This isn't just about a man who couldn't keep it in his pants. This is about systematic deception so deep, so calculated, so expertly crafted that it took a dead woman's guilt to reveal the truth. And if you think you've heard betrayal stories before, if you think you know how this ends, you don't. Because what I discovered, what I did with that information, and what happened to Bowen Harlow when his house of cards finally collapsed, it's the kind of justice that most betrayed wives only dream about. So buckle up. This one's hard to talk about, but it's a story that needs to be told. I live in Portland. Lived. Past tense, because after what I'm about to tell you, I don't live anywhere anymore. I exist in the space between my old life and whatever comes next, suspended in this strange reality where everything I thought I knew was fiction. I was a marketing director for a mid-sized tech company. Good job, decent salary, the kind of stable career that let me be the supportive wife to Bowen's supposedly demanding financial consulting business. He traveled constantly. 3 weeks out of every month, sometimes more. New York, Chicago, Boston, occasionally international trips that kept him away for a month at a time. I should have questioned it. God, I should have questioned everything. But he was so good at making it seem normal, necessary, unavoidable. He'd come home exhausted, stressed, talking about difficult clients and market volatility and the pressure to perform. He'd hold me close and say how much he missed me, how hard it was being away, how he was working so hard to build a future for us. Us? What a joke. He said his mother died of cancer 5 years ago. Lung cancer, aggressive, caught too late. He painted this picture of a woman who'd raised him alone after his father died, who'd sacrificed everything for his education, who'd been his best friend and confidant. When she got sick, he said she didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to drag the family she'd never met through her illness. She made me promise not to tell you how bad it was, he'd say, eyes wet with what I thought was genuine grief. She didn't want you to feel obligated to care for someone you barely knew. Barely knew. That should have been my first clue. What kind of man doesn't introduce his wife to his dying mother? What kind of mother doesn't want to meet the woman her son claims to love? But I believed him. I supported him through the grief. I held him when he cried about missing her. I helped him plan the memorial service, a small, private affair with just a few of his childhood friends, people I'd never met because they lived back east. I even helped him scatter what I thought were her ashes off the Oregon coast, watching him sob as the wind carried away what I now know was probably sand or cremated pet remains or God knows what else. For 5 years, I sent flowers to a grave that didn't exist. I lit candles on her birthday. I listened to him share memories of her that were probably fabricated. I comforted him through his anniversary grief every year, giving him space and understanding when he needed to process his loss alone. Those processing days? He was with them. His real family. The family that mattered. I can't even begin to describe the depth of this betrayal. It's not just that he cheated. It's not just that he lied. It's that he created an entire alternate reality so convincing, so detailed, so emotionally manipulative that I became complicit in my own deception. I was an unwitting accomplice in my own erasure. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning. I was getting ready for work, rushing through my usual routine, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Boston area code. Mrs. Harlow? This is Edmund Blackwood from Blackwood, Sterling and Associates. I'm calling regarding the estate of Deline Harlow. I nearly dropped my coffee. I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. Deline Harlow died 5 years ago. The pause that followed was so long, so heavy with unspoken meaning, that I knew immediately something was very wrong. Mrs. Harlow, I'm afraid that's not accurate. Mrs. Deline Harlow passed away 3 weeks ago. She's left you a substantial inheritance, and we need to discuss the terms of her will. The room spun. My knees buckled. I had to sit down on my kitchen floor, back against the cabinets, trying to process what I'd just heard. That's impossible, I whispered. We scattered her ashes. We had a memorial service. Ma'am, I understand this is confusing. Could you come to Boston this week? There are documents you need to see. Things that Mrs. Harlow specifically wanted you to know. I called in sick to work. I booked a flight that same day. I didn't tell Bowen where I was going, he was supposedly in Chicago on business anyway, wouldn't be home for another week. I just left him a text saying I needed a few days to clear my head, that I'd explain later. The lawyer's office was everything you'd expect from old Boston money, mahogany paneling, leather-bound books, the kind of intimidating gravitas that comes with generations of family secrets and protected wealth. Edmund Blackwood was probably 70, with silver hair and kind eyes that seemed to hold more sympathy than a lawyer should need for a simple inheritance matter. He slid a deed across his desk. A property deed for a house on Martha's Vineyard worth more than I'd make in a lifetime. My name was on it. Not Bowen's. Mine. Your mother-in-law was very specific about this, he said carefully. She wanted the property to go to you directly. Then came the letter. Handwritten on expensive stationery, sealed in an envelope with my name written in careful script. Deline Harlow's final words, addressed to the daughter-in-law she'd supposedly never wanted to meet. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open it. The words swim in my memory now, but I remember the key phrases with crystal clarity. By the time you read this, I'll finally be gone for real. You deserve to know the truth. I've been a coward for too long, letting my son destroy two families while I stayed silent. I thought if I disappeared, if I let him tell you I was dead, it would force him to choose. Instead, he chose both, and that makes me complicit in the pain he's caused you." The letter went on. Page after page of guilt, explanation, and devastating revelation. Deline hadn't died 5 years ago, she'd faked her death with Bowen's help because she'd discovered his double life and couldn't bear the shame. She'd moved to the beach house, cut off all contact with his Portland life, and watched from a distance as he built his real family on the East Coast. "I kept thinking he'd leave one of you," she wrote. "I kept hoping he'd make an honest choice. But years passed, and he just got better at lying. The way he talks about you when he's here, like you're a roommate he's fond of, not a wife he loves. It breaks my heart because I can see in the photos he hides that you love him completely." Photos he hides. What photos? "I'm dying now, really dying, and I can't take this secret with me. The house is yours because you're the one who deserves the truth, and you're the one who's been paying for his lies without knowing it. Check the financial records I've left in the safe. The combination is your birthday, he told me that much about you, at least." The safe. There was a safe in the house. With financial records. With proof of whatever she meant about me paying for his lies. I couldn't even finish reading the letter in the lawyer's office. I was crying too hard, shaking too badly. Edmund gave me tissues and water and time, but mostly he gave me validation that this was as devastating as it felt. "She struggled with this decision for months," he told me. "But in the end, she felt you deserved to know who you'd been married to." I took the keys to the beach house with hands that felt disconnected from my body. I took copies of bank statements and tax documents that Edmund said would explain the financial component. I took Deline's letter and the deed and the weight of knowing that my entire adult life had been built on a foundation of lies. The flight to Martha's Vineyard felt like traveling to another planet. Every mile took me further from the woman I'd been and closer to a truth I wasn't sure I could survive. I kept reading and rereading the letter, trying to find some other interpretation, some way this could all be a mistake. But deep down, in that place where instinct lives, I knew it was true. All those business trips. All those unexplained expenses. All those times he'd seemed distracted, distant, like he was living in two worlds and struggling to keep them separate. Because he was. The house was beautiful. Of course it was. White clapboard siding, blue shutters, a wraparound porch that faced the ocean. The kind of picture-perfect New England cottage that appears in magazines about coastal living and family vacations. The kind of place where memories are made and traditions are born. I used the key Edmund had given me, stepped into the foyer, and immediately saw them. The photos. They were everywhere. Professional family portraits, candid beach shots, Christmas morning pictures, birthday parties. Bowen with a woman who looked nothing like me, blonde where I'm brunette, tall where I'm average, confident and radiant in a way that suggested she'd never doubted her place in his life. 2 children, twins, a boy and a girl who couldn't be more than 8 years old. They had Bowen's eyes, his smile, his way of tilting his head when he laughed. In every single photo, they looked happy. Not just happy, they looked complete. Like a real family. Like the family I thought Bowen and I might become someday, if we ever got around to discussing children seriously, if his travel schedule ever calmed down, if we ever felt financially stable enough. They already were the family I thought we might become. They'd been that family for years. I walked through the house like a ghost haunting someone else's life. Their clothes in the closets. Their toothbrushes in the bathroom. Children's toys scattered in what was clearly a playroom. A family calendar on the kitchen wall with Daddy's home, written in crayon for the weeks when Bowen was supposedly traveling for work. Those weren't work trips. Those were visits home. To his real home. His real life. I found the safe behind a painting in the master bedroom, a painting of a sunset that probably cost more than my car. The combination was indeed my birthday, which felt like a small kindness in an ocean of cruelty. Inside were financial documents that told a story of systematic theft and deception that took my breath away. Bank transfers. Thousands of dollars, moved from our joint account to accounts in his name only. Money I thought was going toward investments, toward our future, toward building the financial security he always said we needed before we could start a family. It was going to them. House payments, private school tuition, family vacations, medical bills, everything you'd expect a father to pay for his children. My money. My contributions to our supposedly shared future. Being used to support the family he'd chosen over me. But it got worse. So much worse. Tax returns filed separately, listing him as head of household with dependents. Insurance policies naming Talia and the children as beneficiaries. A will, a goddamn will, that left everything to them and made no mention of me whatsoever. In the eyes of the law, I didn't exist. I was a roommate, a convenience, a source of income with no legal standing in his life. If he died tomorrow, I would have gotten nothing. The house we shared, the investments we'd made, the life insurance policies I thought protected us both, none of it would have come to me. I called my cousin Marcus that night. Marcus is a forensic accountant, the kind of person who finds hidden money for divorce lawyers and federal investigators. I told him everything, sent him photos of every document I'd found, and asked him to tell me exactly how bad this was. His call back the next morning was devastating in its precision. Odessa, this isn't just adultery. This is fraud, tax evasion, and identity theft. He's been filing false tax returns, claiming dependents he shouldn't have access to, and using your social security number to secure loans you never authorized. You're not just the victim of an affair, you're the victim of a federal crime. Every deposit Marcus traced matched money missing from our account. Every family vacation they'd taken, every private school payment, every expensive toy and piece of clothing I'd seen in that house, I'd paid for it. Unknowingly, unwillingly, but legally, I'd been funding his other family for years. That night, sitting in their perfect living room, surrounded by evidence of their perfect life, I made a promise to myself that I've kept with religious devotion. He won't just lose his family. He'll lose everything. I spent 3 days in that house, documenting everything. Photos of every document, every family picture, every piece of evidence that proved the scope of his deception. I cataloged credit card statements, mortgage payments, investment accounts I'd never heard of. I found birthday cards from the children to Daddy, school reports with his name listed as their father, medical records showing him as their emergency contact. I found love letters from Talia, passionate and intimate, dating back 6 years. 6 years. Which meant this relationship started before his mother's supposed death, before he needed an excuse to travel. This wasn't a grief-induced affair or a moment of weakness that spiraled out of control. This was calculated, premeditated, systematic deception from the very beginning. Marcus worked his magic from Portland, tracking financial records and building a case that would have made federal prosecutors weep with joy. Every hidden account, every false filing, every fraudulent loan, he found it all and laid it out in a presentation that read like a criminal indictment. But I wasn't planning to turn this over to federal prosecutors. Not yet, anyway. I had something much more personal in mind. I called the neighbor who'd been so sweet about their lovely family. Her name was Margaret, and she'd lived next door for 20 years. She knew everything, when they visited, how long they stayed, the little details of their relationship that painted a picture of domestic bliss. Oh, they're wonderful together, she told me over tea in her kitchen. Bowen is such a devoted father. And Talia, she's got such a good head on her shoulders. They've been talking about expanding the house, adding a second story for when the children get older. Expanding the house. With my money. Planning a future that erased me completely. Margaret mentioned something that made my blood freeze. They'll be here for Thanksgiving next week. They always spend Thanksgiving here. It's become their tradition. Thanksgiving was 6 days away. In 6 days, Bowen would walk into that house expecting to find his secret paradise exactly as he'd left it. Instead, he was going to find me. I spent those 6 days planning with the kind of meticulous attention to detail that would have impressed military strategists. I contacted a divorce attorney in Boston who specialized in complex financial fraud cases. I arranged for Marcus to fly out from Portland with his evidence files. I coordinated with Edmund Blackwood to ensure all property transfer documents were ironclad and immediate. Most importantly, I called the IRS. You see, when someone commits tax fraud on this scale, when they're claiming dependents they're not legally entitled to, when they're filing false returns and hiding income across multiple states, the federal government takes a very personal interest in their affairs. The agent I spoke with, a woman named Sandra Chen who sounded like she'd heard every sob story in the book, became genuinely excited when I explained the scope of Bowen's deception. "We'll need to coordinate with local law enforcement," she said. "This isn't just tax fraud, this is identity theft, bigamy, and potentially money laundering. How quickly can you get us those documents?" I overnighted everything to Agent Chen and felt the first genuine satisfaction I'd experienced since this nightmare began. The wheels of justice were turning, and Bowen Harlow was about to get crushed beneath them. Thanksgiving morning, I positioned myself in the living room where I'd have a clear view of the front door. I wore my best dress, did my hair and makeup with extra care. I wanted to look perfect when his world ended. I wanted him to see exactly what he was losing. Marcus was hidden in the kitchen with his laptop and files. Agent Chen was parked down the street with a local police officer, waiting for my signal. The divorce attorney was on standby, ready to serve papers the moment Bowen crossed the threshold. Even Edmund Blackwood was there, prepared to deliver the property deed and his mother's letter. Everything was ready. All I had to do was wait. They arrived at 11:30, their voices carrying across the yard before I saw them. Bowen was laughing at something one of the children had said, that deep, genuine laugh I thought was reserved for me. Talia was carrying what looked like a homemade pie, calling back to the kids to be careful with their overnight bags. They looked perfect. They looked happy. They looked like exactly what they were, a family coming home for the holidays. The key turned in the lock. The door swung open. Bowen stepped inside first, already calling out "We're here," to what he expected would be an empty house. Instead, he found me sitting in his mother's favorite chair, hands folded in my lap, smiling with all the warmth of a funeral director. The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. His mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Behind him, I could hear Talia asking if everything was okay, why he'd stopped moving, what was wrong. "Happy Thanksgiving, honey," I said, my voice steady and sweet. "I've been waiting for you." "Odessa?" His voice cracked on my name like he wasn't sure I was real. "What are you doing here? How did you? Who is she?" Talia had stepped around him, pie still in her hands, confusion and growing alarm written across her face. "Bowen, who is this woman?" I stood up slowly, smoothing my dress, maintaining that funeral director smile. "I'm his other wife," I said simply. The pie hit the floor with a crash that seemed to echo forever. Talia stepped backward, bumping into the children, who were now staring at me with the wide-eyed terror that comes from seeing their perfect world crack apart in real time. "Other wife?" Talia's voice was barely a whisper. "What does she mean, other wife?" Bowen was trapped between us, looking back and forth like a man watching a tennis match that would determine his execution. His mouth moved without sound, searching for words that could possibly explain the unexplainable. "Go ahead, Bowen," I encouraged gently. "Tell them about our 5-year marriage. Tell them about the house we share in Portland. Tell them about how you've been using my money to pay for their private school tuition." "This is insane," he finally managed. "Odessa, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly." I reached for the folder I'd placed on the side table. "I understand that you filed joint tax returns with me while claiming these children as dependents. I understand that you used my credit to secure loans for this house. I understand that you've been committing federal fraud for years." That's when Agent Chen and Officer Rodriguez walked through the front door, badges displayed, expressions serious as heart attacks. Mr. Bowen Harlow? Agent Chen's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. We have some questions about your tax filings. The children started crying. Talia sank onto the couch, staring at her hands like they might hold answers to questions she'd never thought to ask. Bowen looked around the room like a cornered animal, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. This is a mistake, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Whatever she's told you, it's not what it looks like. Agent Chen smiled with the patience of someone who'd heard every excuse ever invented. Sir, we have 5 years of financial records that say otherwise. You're going to need to come with us. The divorce attorney chose that moment to step forward with his briefcase and official papers. Mr. Harlow, I'm serving you with dissolution of marriage papers filed by Mrs. Odessa Harlow in the state of Oregon. You have 30 days to respond. Edmund Blackwood appeared next, carrying the deed and his mother's letter. I also need to inform you that this property now belongs to Mrs. Odessa Harlow, as per your mother's last will and testament. You're currently trespassing. Bowen's legs gave out. He literally collapsed onto the floor, surrounded by the debris of the life he'd built on lies. The children were sobbing, clinging to Talia, who looked like she'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. The perfect Thanksgiving tableau had become a crime scene. I can explain, Bowen whispered, but nobody was listening anymore. Agent Chen was reading him his rights. Officer Rodriguez was asking Talia if she needed medical attention. The divorce attorney was explaining property seizure procedures. Edmund was laying out the timeline for property transfer. I stood in the center of it all, watching justice unfold with the kind of satisfaction that comes from knowing you played your cards perfectly. But the best part, the moment that made every sleepless night and every tear worth it, came when Talia looked up at me with eyes full of devastation and asked the question I'd been waiting for. How long were you married? 5 years, I said simply. Same as you. We started this journey together, it seems. Because that's what I'd figured out from the documents. Talia wasn't some innocent victim who'd fallen for a single man. She'd married Bowen the same month I did, probably in some romantic destination ceremony while I was home planning our domestic life. We were both wives. We were both victims. We'd both been living lies. The difference was, I was walking away with everything. The house arrest was immediate. Federal tax fraud with aggravating circumstances, multiple states, multiple victims, multiple identities. Bowen wouldn't be going anywhere while the investigation continued. His passport was confiscated, his bank accounts frozen, his freedom reduced to the 4 walls of a federal holding cell. Talia's marriage was annulled within a week. Bigamy invalidates everything, and since my marriage came first legally, hers had never existed in the eyes of the law. She lost the house, the financial security, the man she'd thought was her husband, and the father her children had known their entire lives. I should have felt sorry for her. Maybe I would, someday. But sitting in that courtroom, watching her realize that her perfect life had been as fictional as mine, I felt only the cold satisfaction of shared suffering. The financial reckoning was swift and merciless. Every penny Bowen had stolen from our joint account, every fraudulent loan, every hidden investment, it all came back to me with interest and penalties that he would be paying for the rest of his life. The beach house was worth more than everything he'd taken, but I got to keep that too, along with punitive damages that amounted to more money than I'd ever dreamed of having. But the real justice, the moment that made me believe in karma again, came during his sentencing. The judge was a stern woman in her 60s who'd clearly seen every variation of human deception that existed. She read the charges in a voice that could have frozen hell: tax fraud, identity theft, bigamy, money laundering, wire fraud across state lines. Mr. Harlow, she said, looking at him over her reading glasses, in 30 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such a comprehensive and calculated betrayal of trust. You didn't just steal money, you stole years of life from 2 women who loved you. You used their trust as a weapon against them. 7 years in federal prison. 7 years to think about what he'd done, what he'd lost, what he'd destroyed. 7 years while I rebuilt my life with the resources he'd thought he'd hidden from me. The children went to live with Talia's parents. She moved back to Ohio, changed her name, started over. We exchanged numbers, agreed to stay in touch for legal purposes, but never spoke beyond the necessities. What do you say to the other woman when you both realize you were the other woman? I sold the Portland house and moved permanently to Martha's Vineyard. Deline's house became my sanctuary, my refuge, my fresh start. I kept some of the family photos, not out of nostalgia, but as reminders. Evidence of what lies look like when they're perfectly constructed. I started my own consulting business, helping other women who suspected financial fraud in their marriages. Turns out, Bowen's methods weren't as unique as I'd thought. There are hundreds of women out there living half-lives, funding secret families, supporting men who see them as convenient rather than cherished. My first client was a woman in California whose husband's business conferences had been lasting a little too long. My second was a teacher in Texas whose joint tax returns didn't match her husband's supposed income. My third was a nurse in Florida who'd been wondering why their savings account never seemed to grow despite her generous contributions. I found hidden families, secret accounts, false identities, and systematic theft in every case. I helped them gather evidence, coordinate with authorities, and walk away with everything they deserved. I became very good at delivering the kind of justice that the legal system sometimes misses. The work is satisfying in a way that my old marketing job never was. Every cheating husband I expose, every fraudulent scheme I uncover, every woman I help escape from a life built on lies, it feels like I'm paying forward the gift Deline gave me when she decided to tell the truth. Because that's what her letter really was, a gift. The gift of knowing who I'd really been married to. The gift of time to rebuild before I wasted any more years. The gift of resources to start over with dignity and power instead of devastation and poverty. She could have taken her secret to the grave. She could have let me continue living in ignorance, funding Bowen's double life until one of us died or he finally chose between us. Instead, she chose truth, even though it came too late to spare any of us the pain. I visit her grave every few months now. Real grave, real headstone, real flowers. I tell her about the women I've helped, the men I've exposed, the justice I've been able to deliver in her name. I like to think she'd be proud of what her final act of courage set in motion. Bowen writes me letters from prison. They arrive every few months, filled with apologies and explanations and justifications that matter less than nothing. He claims he loved us both. He claims he never meant for it to go on so long. He claims he was going to choose eventually, was planning to make it right, was just waiting for the right moment. I don't read them anymore. I have Marcus screen them for any legal relevance, then file them away unread. His words have no power over me now. His explanations can't undo the damage. His apologies can't give me back the years I spent believing in a love that existed only in my imagination. The anger has faded to something more manageable, not forgiveness, but acceptance. Acceptance that some people are capable of deceptions so profound they reshape reality for everyone around them. Acceptance that love, real love, doesn't build itself on foundations of lies. Acceptance that the life I thought I wanted was never real enough to mourn. What I have now is real. The beach house where I wake up every morning to ocean views and salt air. The business that lets me turn my experience into purpose. The peace that comes from knowing exactly where you stand, exactly what you have, exactly who you are. I'm 36 years old. I own a $3.2 million house on one of the most exclusive islands in America. I run a successful business that helps other women reclaim their lives from men who think female trust is a resource to be exploited. I sleep alone, but I sleep deeply, without the constant low-level anxiety that comes from living with someone whose love feels conditional and whose loyalty feels uncertain. I am free in a way I didn't even know I wanted until I had it. If you're watching this and wondering whether your gut feeling is right, whether those business trips last too long, whether your joint finances seem lighter than they should be, whether your husband seems to live in a world you're not entirely part of, it probably is. Trust that instinct. Investigate that doubt. Don't wait 5 years like I did. Don't let someone else's mother have to die before you learn the truth about your own life. The signs were there all along. The unexplained expenses, the emotional distance, the way he never quite seemed present even when he was home. The way he talked about our future in vague terms while making concrete plans I wasn't part of. The way he compartmentalized his life so completely that I never met his friends, never knew his colleagues, never had access to the parts of himself he claimed were too boring or stressful for me to worry about. I ignored every red flag because I wanted to be the understanding wife, the supportive partner, the woman who trusted completely and loved unconditionally. I thought my willingness to accept his explanations was a strength, a sign of mature love and partnership. It was actually a weakness he exploited with surgical precision. So when you feel that doubt, when something doesn't add up, when your partner's explanations feel rehearsed or defensive or just slightly off, dig deeper. Ask harder questions. Demand to see bank statements and tax returns and financial records. Meet his colleagues and friends and family members. Understand where your money goes and what it pays for. You deserve to know who you're married to. You deserve to know what your life actually costs and what it's actually worth. You deserve to be someone's choice, not their convenient backup plan. And if you discover, like I did, that the man you love has been systematically betraying you while you funded his betrayal, remember that you have options. You have power. You have legal protections and resources and rights that extend far beyond what he wants you to know about. You don't have to disappear quietly. You don't have to accept partial justice or negotiate for scraps of what's rightfully yours. You don't have to preserve his dignity while he destroys your life. You can take everything. And you should. Because that's what he did to you, except he did it with lies while you can do it with truth. That's what makes the justice so perfect, so complete, so satisfying. 5 years ago, I thought I was scattering my mother-in-law's ashes off the Oregon coast. Instead, I was scattering my old life, my naive trust, my willingness to accept partial truths and convenient explanations. Last month, I scattered Deline's real ashes from the deck of her beach house, the house that's now mine, while the sun set over Martha's Vineyard and the waves crashed against the shore where my new life began. This time, I knew exactly what I was letting go of, and exactly what I was keeping forever. The truth. The house. The peace. The power. And the absolute certainty that sometimes, when someone shows you who they really are, the best response isn't forgiveness or understanding or trying to work things out. Sometimes the best response is taking everything they thought they'd hidden from you and walking away with your head held high. That day, Bowen lost everything: his freedom, his reputation, his wives, his children's respect, his mother's house, and every penny he'd thought he'd cleverly hidden from me. But I gained something priceless: peace, truth, and a $3.2 million beach house where I plan to live honestly for the rest of my life. Justice served cold, with ocean views and the sound of waves washing away every lie he ever told me. If you're out there wondering whether your gut feeling is right about your own life, your own marriage, your own secrets being kept from you, it probably is. Don't wait 5 years like I did. Don't let someone else's deathbed confession be the thing that finally opens your eyes. Open them now. Ask the hard questions now. Demand the truth now. Because you deserve to know who you're really married to, and you deserve to live a life built on something more solid than someone else's convenient lies. Like this video if my story helped you understand something about your own life. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about women who fought back and won. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because I want to know that somewhere out there, other women are learning from my pain and using it to protect themselves from their own. I'll see you in the next story, where karma always finds its way home.